my headline today is a press release in Yahoo Finance. MMJ International Holdings submits FDA responses for cannabis gel capsule approval. MMJ International Holdings announces that it has submitted to the US FDA its requested cannabis formulation responses for the agency's review. MMJ has created a gel capsule made from cannabis extracts intended for people with Huntington's disease and multiple sclerosis. These neurological disorders cause muscle spasms and jerks, which progress to both physical and mental deterioration and early death. MMJ was initially issued a DEA analytical lab registration for Schedule I drugs. With the DEA's approval, MMJ became one of the few federally legal labs dedicated to cannabis extraction, research, and development. The approval allows MMJ to manufacture, transport, import, and export cannabis to other DEA or international registrants. However, MMJ is yet to get permission to cultivate cannabis in the US, having to import it from Canada. MMJ recently sued the DEA, alleging a 2-year delay in the application process to cultivate. They applied in June of 2021. After a 6-month inspection, the DEA diversion investigator informed MMJ that they would write up the report and submit it to their supervisor. After numerous attempts to follow up, MMJ is still uncertain of the status of their application. The lawsuit alleges that when asked, DEA personnel responded, "Why do you want to know?" And "We'll get to it when we get to it." Despite the DEA delay, MMJ was able to submit their new drug to the FDA. However, they ran into another hurdle. The FDA notified MMJ that there was a chemistry, manufacturing, and control issue, which required further research. Chief Science Officer Dr. Elio Mariani responded today, stating, "MMJ believes that the responses submitted to the FDA today fully addresses the CMC questions pertaining to its all-natural soft gel capsule of THC and CBD for use in clinical trials." MMJ Chairman Tim Moynihan states, "MMJ has accomplished many milestones, which positions it as a leader in the cannabis pharmaceutical development arena, this being the most significant because safe, reproducible cannabis medicine is needed to set the standard for reproducible results." Recently, speaking at the Benzinga Cannabis Forum, Dwayne Boise, the company's president, mentioned that as federal legalization of the state-to-state recreational and medicinal cannabis businesses is not imminent, MMJ's strategy of pharmaceutical drug development and clinical trials would show itself as the new Cannabis 3.0. If you're wondering who would benefit from delayed federal legalization, you might look in the direction of MMJ International Holdings. However, their goal to develop a standard cannabis-based drug is not unique. GW Pharmaceuticals created Sativex and Epidiolex and is now owned by the Palo Alto-based Jazz Pharmaceuticals. Epidiolex sales were over $200 million in the second quarter of 2023, an increase of 15% year over year. GW and MMJ did not require rescheduling to produce their cannabis-based drugs, just time and money. The good news is that if you are or a loved one are sick and don't have insurance or money to afford these pharmaceutical drugs, you can go down to your local dispensary and with the guidance of a medical cannabis professional, pick up some gummies or tinctures. This is Dr. Jean Talleyrand with High at 9 News.
Dr. T, I mean, this is very, very interesting, this cannabis capsule. I mean, did Marinol go through the similar process?
Marinol is synthetic THC.
So this is actual real THC.
This is extracted THC, exactly. But they all go through a similar process. This might be going through a faster process because I believe they applied for orphan drug status, which tends to happen faster than regular drug development. But regular drug development takes 15, 20 years. So maybe this will take 10 years, just similar to GW's Sativex and Epidiolex. They also applied for orphan drug status.
So you're saying that in reality, if this was to move forward, it wouldn't hit the market for over 10 years.
Likely, yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, that's why the dispensaries have a leg up. They're currently selling products right now, and the only problem is that they're not, as the chairman pointed out, they're not reproducible. Meaning, one batch is a little bit different than the next batch.
Interesting. So another quick question, Dr. Talleyrand. If cannabis was moved, and this is for you too, Dr. Mark, cannabis was moved to Schedule 3, wouldn't the FDA be able to claim a drug preclusion in regards with this, since they would have a FDA permitted form of actual THC?
Ask that again in a different way.
So basically, let's assume that cannabis gets moved to Schedule 3. Let's just assume that happens for the sake of this question, and then at that point, and with this drug, let's just say it moves forward through the FDA process and they gain an approval. At that point in time, wouldn't they be able to claim drug preclusion on actual THC?
You mean because it was already submitted as?
Because it being FDA approved, and therefore also too, since it'd be Schedule 3, FDA would have jurisdiction on all Schedule 3 drugs. And so why wouldn't there be drug preclusion, since there is a certified FDA medicine for THC?
Well, this drug is different because it's a combination of THC and CBD, more similar to Sativex is my guess than just straight THC.
So you wouldn't call it full spectrum then?
No, probably not, because if they added all these other additives, they probably took everything away and just put THC and CBD in there.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to concentrate on this story when I'm seeing so much thigh in the lab, Dr. Mark. I mean, what is that you're wearing over there? I do not know. I don't know how that does. Well, I mean, I see that, right, Jerry? But
yeah.
Flashing some thigh. I don't know if that is laboratory approved ISO 17,000 mankini over there. It's a little distracting. I mean, it's interesting. First of all, I'm gonna be a Benzinger. I hope I see this guy, the president of this company. I'm willing to be part of their preclinical R&D test case. I'll chomp some capsules and take a heroic dose and see what we can do in Chi-Town with this thing. The thing for me is, I don't know why every other article that we cover on this show is about somebody suing somebody and somebody suing somebody else and somebody suing somebody. It's and on the one hand, I'm like, yeah, sue the DEA, sue them. And on the other hand, I'm like, oh, you had to wait 2 years? Well, welcome to regulated cannabis. I mean, if every social equity applicant waiting to get a permit sued because they'd crossed the 2-year threshold, we wouldn't have any room in any of the civil courts in the United States. So I'm a little conflicted. I'd like to see the regulatory process go a lot quicker. I recognize the cost of that time value, right? Not getting your oar in the water, not being able to run your business, not being able to get further along in the scientific process. And 2 years is, I mean, in regulated cannabis, that's like they'll barely review your app. Sorry, talk to anybody who's got a permit in Mendocino trying to get go from a provisional to an annual.
Yeah,
These guys are probably don't want the legal or recreational market to move forward. I mean, this is a race, right?
Yeah,
because
why
you have
they?
A choice.
That's
right.
exactly why I bring up the drug preclusion component, especially with that, because it would be very easy for the FDA to say that this is the only form of THC that's able to be sold on any shelf, and therefore every dispensary is out of business or being forced to only offer this one sole product.
But Jason, the FDA is saying that now, and they can't get the dispensary.
Yeah, but it's a Schedule 1 drug, so they don't have enforcement over it.
So running clinical trials to tell the world what we already know about cannabis is foolish and a waste of money. Okay? So, running clinical trials on the other side of those clinical trials gives you the ability to make medical claims because you've now taken it through the clinical trial process. But you're right, it's a fool's errand to take a public composition like CBD or THC through the FDA approval process because they don't have a patent on the active ingredient, so they can't sit down on the rest of the industry, which means they're going to dig themselves a huge cash hole with those clinical trials that they'll never recover. This is nothing but a scam to get money from investors who are hot that this is going to somehow be the future of cannabis. It's not, people. You can't patent THC and CBD. So taking it through clinical trials is not only stupid, we've already know that this is already effective, and they need to figure out a different mechanism for botanical active ingredients to incorporate that into the modern pharmacopoeia. It's not through single active ingredient clinical trials, which is what the FDA is programmed for. So this is just all spin and bullshit. Move on to the next story, please.
With a mic drop right there, Dr. Mark. Oh man, I wonder if
Show
we should
me that.
just.
Oh, look at that. Are you naked? Because
I feel like
I'm gonna come without pants
I feel
next
like
Friday. I won't be late, but I'll be without pants.
I feel like
I'm making nano emulsions, man. I'm doing a real
You're like,
thing.
girl, let's do
oh
some bench
boy,
work.
man, we got some real science going on today. I love that. I love that, Dr. Mark. That makes a lot of sense. So this is basically just a pump and dump right now. They're going to try to raise all kinds of money off of this story and
Yeah.
their press release and da 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 da, and be like, oh,
I mean,
we're the best thing since sliced
Jason,
bread.
if Jazz Pharmaceuticals used to be GW can sit down on the rest of the CBD industry, those market shares for Epidiolex would be huge. But we all know that I can go buy a CBD tincture for about 20 or 30 bucks down the road here, but Epidiolex costs thousands of dollars paid for by drug insurance, bought for at a drugstore. It's all about drugs. Cannabis is not a drug. It's a medicated herb and it needs to be regulated as such. Jesus Christ. There is no play for big pharma with medicated herbs, period.
But Dr. Mark, you got to point to the evidence. I mean, money speaks, and 15% growth from last quarter this time to this quarter this time is real money. $200 million in a quarter is real money.
You're talking about Epidiolex?
Correct.
Yeah. Well, I know people who can't afford that medicine, but they take CBD oil and get the same relief without having to pay for some FDA approved Epidiolex bullshit. Look, man, if you want CBD or you want THC, there's plenty of places to go get those. We don't need those to be put through FDA trials, period.
I have to say, though, I did have a patient who we were using the oil, and because the growers weren't consistent, the seizures would come back until eventually we had to go to Epidiolex, and that's what she's on right now. So maybe the oil was even more efficacious, but it wasn't consistent, and so that's something that the industry has to consider.
Well,
Consistency.
there just aren't quality control measures and not the
Correct.
proper regulatory oversight on the CBD end of the cannabis industry. And until that is more tightly regulated and there's GMP production throughout the supply chain, you're going to see variation like that. But needless to say, there is good CBD oil that's out there. You just have to, hook up with the supply chain and
Find it.
Yeah.
And just as an aside, totally pro tip, Dr. Mark, and certainly I'm not trying to tell you how to run the science part, but when you are without pants and you're viewable to the constituents who do tune in to High at 9 News on a Friday morning, just pro tip, never be without pants and be mentioning the word nano, okay? Maybe macro, maybe, but never nano, okay? Just it's not good optics, right? So like
Oh
you
boy.
want to
Oh
strike that
boy.
from your
Oh boy.
vocabulary when you're not wearing pants. Never nano.
Oh,
Never
man.
nano, never
Well,
micro.
micro
Never,
is okay.
Yes.
no. Anytime you're talking microns, you want to have your pants on. Okay. It's
Oh
just,
boy.
it's just
It's
the way
just
it
is.
is.
Keep your pants on. Keep your pants on there, Yarrow, because